having written this book, that's kind of, it's been, I guess, 7 years or so. Have you actually had any kind of traction with like interacting with the people who run the Nobel Prize, or even getting any feedback on your ideas about like improving it?
Initially I did. I mean, everything has an exponential decay curve to it, right? So first year, now you say 7 years, it makes me feel really old because I remember writing it, 10 years ago before I had some kids that I now have. So it kind of dates a period in my life. And truth be told, it's something I was obsessed with as a kid and a postdoc and a graduate student. And I almost never think about it now. I have been asked once, I was shocked. I got the letter to nominate a second time. So in the book, I talk about the first time I was asked to nominate and how I took it as a homework assignment, to kind of rehabilitate or redeem what Alfred Nobel really wanted. He said it should go to one person who came up with an invention last year that had the greatest benefit to mankind. And now it's 3 people can win it for stuff they did 20 years ago. 50 years ago, and who knows if it has a benefit to mankind. Abstractly, did the lighthouse have a huge benefit to mankind? At that time it did, but it's certainly not like LIGO or something else. And interestingly enough, I've talked to, Barry Barish wrote the foreword to my second book, and he complains about a lot of the stuff that I complained about, but no one's ever refused the Nobel Prize. And no one's ever, said, well, I think I'm going to take my Nobel Prize. And the LIGO team, many of whom contacted me throughout the writing and post-writing the book, saying, I should have done it. I should have, they didn't take the prize and cut it into 1,000 pieces. They could have. I mean, the degree to which the scientific community worships the Nobel Prize and they cultivate that as a monopoly is the thing that most surprised me about it. Just how criticizing it otherwise atheistic people like Sean Carroll, if I criticized it, oh no, it has all these great features and it's wonderful. And even though he wrote, a blurb for the book, a lot of people just, Sabina Hassenfeld or another person, they think it's great. And they think, yes, it has some problems, but nobody thinks about changing it, reforming it, what could be done to it. So I think a lot of it, every single right sitting in this chair, Adam Rees was here last year. And he said, yeah, it should go to everybody on the team. And I'm like, well, did you give yours back? Can you get a piece of it to your friend, at the University of Texas who deserves it, And they never do. Even Feynman, Feynman claimed that, you didn't care about it. He wasn't going to go to the ceremony and pick it up. Supposedly he drilled a hole in it to where it's a big chain around his neck. Nobody can prove that. I don't think that's true at all. But, he would say things like, I did it, despite the Nobel Prize, I don't want to be a member of this club. And then, but he kept his Nobel Prize and he would refer to it, right?
Is it like actually a time maybe to create like a new system? Because it reminds me, it's like, maybe people who work in like industry with like Jira tickets, like to move the progress. Yeah. And then people start to abuse it in some sense. So it's like, they're not really like working on the progress, but they're working to satisfy it and move all this like the Jira tickets game. So would like the Nobel Prize turn into maybe originally, since maybe like the first Nobel Prizes, they were kind of satisfying, the kind of awarding the big breakthroughs in science, and then it turned out into something else. So do you have any like suggestions of use? What would be like the new way of kind of stimulating the breakthroughs in science and technology?
Look, I mean, I think, the goal in writing it wasn't to tear it down and destroy it. It was to reform it. I don't think there's anything irredeemable about it that couldn't be fixed without, some attention to detail. The last time the rules were rewritten again was 1974, like 50 plus years ago. And that was to like allow or to forbid posthumous awarding of the Nobel Prize. That was one of the things. So like anything that doesn't change, that's changed once in its history, officially. And remember, they changed it unofficially a couple of years after Alfred Nobel died. They gave it to 3 people, like Marie Curie and her husband, and I always forget the third. It wasn't Becquerel, but anyway, the point is it can be reformed, and it should be. If they want that, my whole point in the discussion of the Nobel Prize was only 3 chapters out of 11. It's not really about that. It's more a memoir of being a scientist. But it was still like, let's save the Nobel Prize before it's too late. Because all these other prizes, they're talking about the Pulitzer Prize. Nobody cares about the Pulitzer Prize anymore. I mean, if you're in writing, maybe you do a newspaper, but nobody really cares about it. These things don't, but it used to be much more prestigious than the Nobel Prize for a long time. And now, there are other prizes, the breakthrough prizes, people don't really associate Templeton Prize was established explicitly to be worth more money than a Nobel Prize because it was about religion, spirituality, and the sciences harmonization. And Templeton, Sir John Templeton, wanted to make the money equal or better than the Nobel Prize. So all these spin-off things have come about. Jim Simons was asked to invest their portfolio I think it was in the 1990s. He was an unpaid financial advisor to the Nobel Prize Committee. So they obviously care about it. They want to keep it going. So some of this could be made for reform so that they don't get, Me Too'd or, they don't have.
What's the one change? If you made one change, what would it be?
I think the exclusion of teams is the biggest flaw and the biggest contradiction between how science is done now versus 1900. That, teams of 1,000 people are needed, more. The Higgs boson, went to 3 people, Brown and Englert and Higgs, and that rewrote, people like my graduate school group theory professor Jerry Guralnick, calling out of history.
But let's say if I have 5 minutes to decide who to have control a bunch of funding, and I'm using the Nobel Prize to make that decision, and you give it to 2,000 people, what am I supposed to do?
Well, no, I mean, there's always.
I'm just saying, doesn't that reduce the social utility of it? If the social utility is to single out some people and kind of arbitrarily give them some if you're, sway in society,
as long as you're not afraid of a little
scientific
work,
society.
I mean, let's say it went into this building right now. They said we're going to drop a Nobel Prize on everyone in this building. Do you think it would be really hard to figure out that you probably won it because you're in the building, not because you did any of the work that was actually related to what my colleague upstairs discovered, life on an extrasolar planet? I mean, this is something that we could debate, but in science, I mean, there's always a hierarchy. Okay, so students work on it, they get to claim a Nobel Prize, that they have it, maybe they win $50 or whatever it comes out to be. I think that would encourage more scientifically to be able to say things like that. That's what happened with the climate, with the IPCC Nobel Peace Prize. There were physicists on that are Nobel Prize winners because they won the Nobel Peace Prize because they're part of this intergovernmental panel. So I don't think it would diminish. They claim it. Al Gore, claims it. And I think, more than that, I mean, I would be more worried about the irrelevancy of the Nobel Prize in the future. People aren't going to care. Or there'll be somebody who says, look, you can have a Nobel Prize, but if you do, you won't get this $1 billion. I mean, it could happen. Some super billionaire could say, I want only stuff. Let's say Musk, completely took over all of science in America and just uses his whole fortune and says, the only thing U.S. should do is go to Mars. I don't think that's a smart thing to do, but he could do that. And then there would be enough of a disruption to, if he paid every single professor in this department $1 billion to work on nothing but Mars, you don't think they would do it because they care so much about, detecting some molecule on some other planet? Maybe those that hate him would do that. They wouldn't take his money. But I think, if you paid a person enough money, even a scientist, they would say that. So I think, and then what would happen to the Nobel Prize? It would be for going to Mars. So I think if the Nobel Prize doesn't cultivate the essence and the core of what it means to do science and what makes us uniquely capable of doing science as human beings, operating teams and building instrumentation and pushing the boundaries, I think it may be at risk of being irrelevant. Again, it's kind of like my hope that it survives, not that it goes away and I want to kill it.